get to that plan to put you in the position that, you know, we don't see something like this happen again. Again, I say the same thing I said to Ms. Williams, you know, Brown, that you're doing more with less. And you're
right.
trying to do more with less. I have a particular view. Others will disagree. I don't believe you can do more with less. So
Welcome back to Freedom Forge. If you care about truth, accountability, and cutting through the noise in Washington, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what we're about to break down is something every American needs to see. Today, we're reacting to a Senate hearing that, on the surface, looks like routine government oversight, but underneath it reveals something much bigger. This hearing focused on funding cuts, government accountability, and whether key agencies like the Government Accountability Office and Congressional Budget Office can still effectively do their jobs while being stretched thin. Lawmakers questioned officials about budget reductions, staffing losses, cyber threats, and whether these agencies are being asked to do more with less.
Thank you, Mr. Strong. I now recognize Ranking Member DeLauro for her 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Williams-Brown, thank you, and Dr. Swagel, for being here this morning. Sorry I was late in coming. But let me just start with you, Ms. Williams-Brown. It doesn't really go amiss that the GAO helps Congress so much. You evaluate national security, you analyze healthcare spending, so that the work created under your leadership at GAO is really crucial. We're grateful for the constant information and the data that you provide to improve the decisions that we make. And you also have the responsibility for enforcing Congress's power of the purse. So we're grateful to you for that. Let me just ask about your workforce. And despite all of the great work and information you and your agency provide to Congress, funding for the GAO was almost halved last year. And it's currently, and for flat funding since 2024. As a result, almost 200 employees had to be let go from your agency. Can you tell us how this has impacted the agency, how it's impacted the operations? And letting us know, do you feel as though you're properly staffed for the amount of work that you conduct and produce for the Congress?
So the employees that separated it's happened across the organization. So it's been analysts that directly do the work. It's also been our operations and support across the agency. One area particularly hard hit has been our information technology group. They've lost a fair number of resources. So it has an impact on the organization. We worked really hard to try to minimize that impact. If there's a critical area that we absolutely need to backfill because we're one person deep, we do that. And in terms of the impact on the direct support of the Congress, it requires us to shift, make trade-offs, and reposition ourselves to make sure we are addressing the Congress's highest priorities.
And look, I know you're trying to, and you're working at doing more with less. There's no question in my mind in what you do. But you mentioned IT as one of the areas which is impacted. But in terms of responsiveness to the Congress, you talked about issues. Where does that...
Where does it show up?
Where does it show up? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
It shows up really in some ways in our responsiveness in terms of being able to get to requests. Number one priority for us, mandates, as I said before. Second priority are requests from chairs and ranking members. So more than half of our work is mandated. So that then it creates a smaller workforce for us to be able to respond to the requests from the chairs and ranking member, and it can result in longer queue times.
Okay. And so your request, you were cut by about 40% the last go-around, is my understanding. The budget was almost half, and you're asking for $48 million right now.
Yeah, so it was almost. It wasn't. We were flat.
Well,
We
no,
have a
no,
flat-
it was a
yes.
cut, but then
Right.
we worked it so that you
Yes,
got, you
yes,
know,
and
that
we
you
are
were
eternally grateful.
flat funded.
Yeah.
You know, so that, and in this environment, in many instances, flat funding is a win. But that's not the point. The point is to be able to see that you have the opportunity to be able to increase the efforts and the demands that the Congress puts on you with regard to requests. So we'll keep that very, very much in mind as we look at what you're requesting. Okay, and the IT, people have talked about AI, et cetera, so they're, you know, obviously, we should be state-of-the-art. Let me just ask quickly, Dr. Swagel, and thank you at CBO as well, deeply concerned at the news of the cyber attack on the Congressional Budget Office. It's a reminder that we need to continue to be vigilant, continue to prepare for cyber threats. It can happen at any time. Today, with the funds you currently have, do you think you are fully prepared for another event like this? And as technology continues to evolve, do you feel as though the technology you currently use is adequate in this day and age?
No, thank you, and thank you again to the committee for the resources to respond to the challenge we had this year. We're in a good place now with the changes we've made in response to the incident, but we have a plan now to do better, and it's both on the hardware side and on the software side within our network, and that's just the work of the next year and then beyond. So we're working on it, but it's still a work in progress.
And what does that mean in terms of your request, your funding request, to get to that plan, to put you in the position that, you know, we don't see something like this happen again? Again, I say the same thing I said to Ms. Williams, Brown, that you're doing more with less. And you're
right.
trying to do more with less. I have a particular view, others will disagree. I don't believe you can do more with less, so I stipulate. But I'm interested to know what, I think you asked for 1.5 million?
That's right.
Is that enough?
I'll answer it.
We need to finish that one quickly because
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We had certain one-time expenditures this year that won't recur, and that's why we're asking for still an elevated amount for cyber activities, but less than in the past. And I think it will be enough for us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
Yield
you.
back.
And right away, you can see the tone of this hearing. There's concern being raised about nearly 200 employees being let go and how that affects national security analysis, healthcare oversight, and congressional decision-making. That's not a small number. That's a serious reduction in manpower for agencies that are supposed to keep the government honest. Now let me give you my take on this, because this is where things get interesting. What you're really seeing here is the classic Washington contradiction. On one hand, politicians constantly talk about cutting spending and reducing government size. On the other hand, when it actually happens, suddenly there's panic about whether agencies can still function. And here's the truth from a right-wing perspective. Government should absolutely be efficient, but efficiency doesn't mean gutting critical oversight. Because let's be honest, agencies like the GAO exist for one reason: to keep the rest of government in check. They evaluate national security, analyze spending, and help Congress make informed decisions. If you weaken that, you're not shrinking government power. You're making it less accountable. That's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Now in this hearing, the official made it clear that these cuts are hitting across the board: analysts, operations, even IT teams. And one area that took a major hit: cybersecurity. Let that sink in. At a time when cyber threats are growing every single day, we're reducing the very people responsible for defending against them. That's not conservative. That's careless. Conservatism is about smart governance. It's about prioritizing what actually matters: national security, fiscal responsibility, and accountability. And cybersecurity sits right at the intersection of all three. Now here's another key moment that stood out to me. The official admitted that these cuts are already slowing down responsiveness to Congress. That means longer wait times for reports, slower analysis, and delays in getting critical information to lawmakers. Think about that. Congress is making decisions on spending, war, healthcare, and national security, and they're doing it with slower, reduced support. That's not a recipe for strong leadership. That's how mistakes happen. And then we get to the part that really exposes the disconnect. You hear lawmakers saying, "We know you're trying to do more with less." And one of them even says outright, "I don't believe you can do more with less." Exactly. That's the reality. You can cut waste, yes. You can streamline processes, yes. But at some point, cutting resources means cutting capability. And when that capability involves oversight and national security, the consequences are serious. Now let's talk about the cyber attack mentioned in the hearing. This is a wake-up call, a direct reminder that threats aren't hypothetical. They're already happening. And even the officials admitted that while they've made improvements, their systems are still a work in progress. That should concern every American. Because while Washington debates budgets and politics, our adversaries are moving fast. They're not waiting for funding approvals. They're not slowing down. And if we're not fully prepared, we're vulnerable. So here's where I stand. I support cutting wasteful spending. I support reducing bloated bureaucracy. But I do not support weakening the very institutions that keep our government accountable and our country secure. There's a difference between trimming fat and cutting muscle. And right now, it looks like Washington might be cutting muscle. This hearing may not have had the drama of a shouting match, but it revealed something just as important: a system under strain. A system being asked to do more, respond faster, and defend against growing threats with fewer resources. That's not sustainable. And if we don't address it now, we're going to pay for it later, whether that's in bad policy decisions, missed intelligence, or vulnerabilities that could have been prevented. So the question is simple. Do we want a government that is smaller but smarter, or smaller and weaker? Because there's a big difference. If you want more breakdowns like this, where we go beyond the headlines and actually tell you what's going on, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Freedom Forge. Stay informed, stay sharp, stay free.